Hello, everyone, and welcome to this reflection on the Die Hard film franchise. I'm joined today by Jack, the film fanatic, and we are going to be talking about how Bruce Willis got 5 paychecks. I'm only joking. No, we're talking about the movies, the Die Hard franchise, which is arguably one of the most famous action franchises to date. Um, don't take that as too much of a compliment, depending on the qualities of said movies. Obviously, we're going to talk about all 5 films, so that's Die Hard, Die Hard 2, Die Harder, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Die Hard 4.0, or Live Free or Die Hard, depending where you're from, and A Good Day to Die Hard. Boy, it was. But anyway, so we'll start at the beginning. A very good place to start. So, Jack, would you like to begin and talk about the original Die Hard film from 1988, which is arguably the best Christmas movie ever made?
Yeah, well, Die Hard. Well, you say it's a Christmas film. I kind of consider it more of an action movie than a Christmas movie. But
It's
um,
both.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, as for Die Hard, I think it's a really great film. I think it's definitely one of the best action films ever made, and one of the best action films of the '80s. And it came out same weekend as the Midnight Run with Robert De Niro and the Deadpool, which is the last Dirty Harry film. So I think Bruce Willis, before this, he was mostly known for TV show he did called Moonlighting, and he was more like a comedy sort of actor. And originally, they wanted like Arnold Schwarzenegger to do this film. They wanted to be like a sequel to Commando, but he didn't want to do it, so they got Bruce Willis in. And I think they did a really great job here because I think John McTiernan's direction is great. I think Bruce Willis is really good in this film, and it's just a really entertaining action film. I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, what did you think of like Bruce Willis in this?
Yeah, I'll go into more detail with my own thoughts when I come to talk about it. But yeah, it's definitely certainly in the first movie, it's definitely a great role for him, and he's allowed to be sort of charming and and everything, but also be tough at the same time. He's sort of he definitely became iconic from this role, and I think so much of the role almost feels like it was written for him. So yeah, I think it was definitely the right choice. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger would have been okay. I mean, he's a passable stuntman who can hold the screen, but as far as the acting chops go, if I had to choose, yeah, it'd be Bruce Willis. So yeah, and also with Arnold being famous for the Terminator, I think it would have been just very jarring, and it would have reminded people too much of that. But yeah,
Yeah, no, I think Bruce Willis was a really good choice, and I just think the film has some great dialogue, like at the start where he's on the plane and the guy says to him, make fists with your toes. Like that's quite funny, and I think Bruce Willis is really good in this, and he's kind of a believable action star. Like his character isn't really like he isn't really like a buff, muscly man. He's just sort of like your everyday cop, and I like that. I like the fact that his character is quite human. Like we find out that he's having problems with his wife Holly, and they're at the Nakatomi Plaza, and I think the characters are really good here. Like I like the black chauffeur in the film. I forget the character's name, but he's very good. And it's interesting how Holly is working at the Nakatomi Plaza, and she's going under her name Holly Gennaro, and instead of Holly McLean, which really pisses off John McLean. And he brings that up to her later on, where they're at the party. That he acts, nice at the start, and then he sort of gets into a bit of a fight with her. And I think some of the characters here are really interesting. Like you got the head of the Nakatomi Plaza, and you've got this guy later on who betrays John McClane, and I think the main villains here are really good. I mean, you've got uh, Alan Rickman in this film. He's very good as Hans Gruber, and for all those Harry Potter fans, he's probably best known as Professor Snape, but I think this might be his best role or one of his best roles as Hans Gruber, this like German terrorist. And I like the storyline. You know, at first you think there are these terrorists, and they're like saying, "Oh, we want these terrorists released from jail," and they're like talking about the IRA in Belfast and stuff, which was quite funny. And then at the end we find out that they're not actually terrorists. They're there to steal the money inside the vault in Nakatomi Plaza. And it's interesting how John McClane, he kind of avoids all this because I think he's on the top floor when it all happens. When they're having the party, he's away somewhere else. So he's trying to stop them, and in the end, they end up getting all the hostages and stuff. And I quite like Bonnie Bedelia's Holly McLean. Like the fact that she finds out that John's risking his life to do all this stuff for her. I think that's great. You've got some great action scenes. I love the bit where John McClane, he fights that German terrorist, and then he gets his machine gun and he writes it on the guy's vest. Ho ho ho! Now I have a machine gun. That was really funny, and there's some great scenes there. I like the scene where Hans Gruber's talking to the head of the Nakatomi Plaza, and he says, "Well, I'm not going to give you the code to the safe, so you're just going to have to shoot me." And he says, "Okay," and he just shoots him. It was just pretty, cold. And I like all the stuff where John McClane's talking to Hans Gruber over over the radio, and he's taking all his guys out one by one. He's like, and he says, I've got a machine gun now, and I'm going to try and stop you. And then he says, what do you think you are, like a cowboy, like John Wayne? And he says, I'm partial to Roy Rogers myself. And then he says, oh, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. That classic line. And you just got some great action scenes. I love that action scene, probably my favorite, where he's on top of the roof and he jumps from the top of the roof as it blows up, and he ties that hose around him, and then he smashes through the window and he shoots the window with his gun. That was really good. And you got some interesting characters. Like you got that fat black policeman. I forget his name, but he's very good in the film. And we see at one point that John McClane, he's trying to call the police, and they don't believe him. And just that great line where he's like, he calls 911. She says, "Oh, this is for emergency lines only," and he says, "Oh, what the hell do you think I'm doing, lady? Ordering a pizza?" That's really funny. And we see that he calls this cop, and you see that he tries to warn him, so he puts a dead body on the chair and he pushes it out the window, and it lands on top of his car, and then he realizes that there are terrorists there. And later on, John McClane reveals to him what he had to do, and he had to get his attention by shooting at him, shooting at his car with a machine gun. And I think the relationship with John McClane and the cops in this is quite interesting. Like you've got a Robert Davi in this film. He plays one of the cops. I think he's FBI. And there's this other guy on the police force, and he's a bit of a prick. I mean, he doesn't really care what John McClane has to say because he's just this rookie cop. And we see that McClane kind of takes things into his own hands. There's that bit where he gets the explosives and he like straps it to a chair and throws it down the lift, and it blows up, and he like wipes out some of Hans Gruber's men. And there's many instances in the film where he takes out Hans Gruber's guys. Like there's a scene later on where he's shooting at one of them, and he gets glass in his feet, and he has to remove all the glass from his feet, which was I mean, it must have been pretty sore having all that glass in your feet and removing it. You see the blood. And there's a great scene as well where he's going through the vent, and he's got the lighter there, and he's going through the vent, and that's really well done as well. And yeah, there's just a lot of great scenes in the film. Like the soundtrack's really great as well. I really like the soundtrack. I think that's good. And I think, like I said, Alan Rickman's great as Hans Gruber. There's a really great scene in the film as well where he meets John McClane, and John McClane doesn't know what he looks like. So he puts on this American accent. I mean, apparently Alan Rickman improvised that scene, and he puts on this American accent. And he's talking to John McClane, and McClane thinks he's all right, and then he takes the gun off McClane, and he tries to kill him. And there's that prick as well, that guy with the beard who's with who knows Holly McClane, and he reveals what John McClane looks like. Like they're looking at the photo with him and his family, and they find out who his wife is, and we see that the guy, he's pouring him a Diet Coke and he's telling him everything, like, and he's talking to John McClane on the radio, and he's like, "Oh, John, just surrender yourself, give yourself up," and then they just kill him, which was pretty dark. But there's tons of great action scenes in the movie. I like the action scene towards the end as well, where he's fighting a guy and he hangs him up uh, on this hook or whatever. Yeah, something like that. He like hangs him on this hook. That was a really well done action scene, and there's loads of action scenes in the movie which are really great. And like I said, the characters are great. There's some great action moments in there. I love towards the end of the film where he gets like sticky tape and he like sticks the gun to the back to his back, and you see the terrorists as well. They're like trying to hack the computers, and there's this like black guy who's working for Hans Gruber, and he's like hacking all the computers, and they manage to get the money. And John McClane finds out that he's a common thief. But I think the ending's great, where you've got Hans Gruber there, and he's holding Holly McClane, and John McClane, he gets his gun out and he shoots him dead, and he shoots him through the window, and that scene where Alan Rickman falls and you see that reaction on his face, that was actually real. They dropped him from quite a height without telling him, and it's a great scene, where he falls to his death and he dies, and I really like the ending of the film where there's that final terrorist left, and we see that the black cop that's been talking to John McClane the whole time, he shoots the guy dead, and that's the end of the film. It's a really great way that we see he's with Holly McClane, and they're playing "Oh, Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow." Um, yeah, that's a great that's a great scene, and yeah, and I like the fact they played that song at the end, and setting it at Christmas. It is one of the best Christmas films, although technically it's not really a Christmas film because it's not really anything to do with the theme of Christmas. It's just set during that time. But yeah, it's a great film, and it's definitely the best of the franchise. It's the best Die Hard film, in my opinion. I think anyway. I think it's really great, and yeah, I mean, in conclusion, I don't really have any flaws with Die Hard. I think the action's great. I think Bruce Willis is great. I think Alan Rickman's great. I think Bonnie Bedelia's Holly McClane is great. I think the whole cast is great in the action, and for me, it's a perfect film. It really is. It's a great action film. It's one of the best action films ever made, and I think a lot of people would say this is probably the best action film ever made, and it's definitely my like top 10. So I'll close off by giving Die Hard an easy 10 out of 10.
Wow, thanks, Jack, for that wonderful summarization. The first Die Hard, oh yeah, easily the best. Without question. You don't even have to see the sequels to know that this one is the best. Die Hard is one of those rare movies that it kind of, when you first see it, it appears to be just kind of a standard shoot 'em up kind of action movie without much substance. But actually, it's one of those movies that kind of define that genre. And I think a lot of movies have tried to copy Die Hard ever since then, since it was released. And
Yeah, I mean, have you seen Skyscraper with Dwayne the Rock Johnson? It's basically a Die Hard ripoff.
I've seen the trailer for it. It didn't look very good. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, no, and arguably it's the most violent Christmas movie ever made. But yeah, that's fine. I have no problem with it being set at Christmas. And what I like about Die Hard is the way it executes itself. I mean, the action and spectacle is amazing, and when it's there, it's brilliant, and you feel the brutality and the blood of the action sequences. It makes the situation feel as real as it can. But what I like is also the human side of the story. The fact that the first 20 minutes serve as like a prelude to to the main events of the story. Obviously, the main events of the story take place in the skyscraper, and McClane is in there for most of the film. But I liked sort of kind of setting up the characters, introducing him and his, the sort of distant relationship he had with, well, not distant, sorry, but yeah, the kind of issues he had with his with his daughter's name and everything, and his how he sort of was getting on with Bonnie Bedelia's character, his wife.
Sorry, do you mean his wife's name, like the way that his wife is using her name before she got married to him? I think that's the reason why he's like pissed off.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't remember, but yeah, basically that. I mean, obviously Bonnie Bedelia gets more of a role, more of a feature later in the story, but it was nice to see the characters, and immediately we get to see John and his sort of life and how he's a cop, and he seems like a good guy, and he's just trying to live his life and enjoy his Christmas. And then in come the terrorists, or the robbers, whatever you want to call them. But I think Alan Rickman is definitely the standout of this movie as Hans Gruber. The German accent that he puts on, it's quite subtle, but it actually works really well. And he actually he displays a character who's very sort of cunning and very clever. He's someone who is not very easily outwitted, and I like the scene when he outwits when he tries to deceive McClane, when he changes his accent to, I think, American. That was quite a good confrontation, and throughout the film is just this sort of like sort of cuts between the two of them, and we get to see how ruthless Gruber really is. I guess he's called Hans Gruber for a reason. And yeah, he's excellent. He definitely elevates the film a lot. Bruce Willis is very good. I mean, obviously the role was kind of made for him. He's got the charm, and he's got the sort of the wisecracks to play the role, and he's a good enough stuntman, which is always handy in this sort of film. I mean, I don't think Paul Blart Mall Cop really quite compares, but that's another film to talk about for another day. Yeah, I love the action. I mean, that's what Die Hard is made for. It's not really made for the plot. It's made for the action, and it's one of those rare cases where it actually works really well. And the plot itself it's thin, but it's good enough for what this movie requires. It's not trying to be complicated. It's just trying to be fun.
I mean, sorry to interrupt, but I actually think the plot is quite good for this because you think that there are these terrorists to begin with, and he says he'll release all these prisoners. And it turns out they're really there to like steal money from the Nakatomi Plaza. So I kind of like he sort of tricks them all, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
But even so, it doesn't try to be this convoluted, mystery or anything. It's just, it's fairly easy to follow, and that's what I like. It's not something that tries to be pretentious with with its story. And it wants you to have fun, and I think it's very easy to have fun with this particular Die Hard movie because the direction by John McTiernan is so slick, and it's excellently directed, and you can see why. I think it won the Oscars, didn't it? Or it was definitely nominated. But you can see that there's a lot of good craft that has gone into this, and the sort of scope of it really is epic. I mean, with the way it's set in the skyscraper, and especially certain scenes where you kind of just literally feel like tension, where McClane's walking on glass and he's climbing down the elevator shaft with his gun sort of wedged between the doors, and he's using the rope, and so he puts himself really in these awful situations to do his job. I mean, if he doesn't get an Employee of the Month award, I don't know who else will, because wow, that's dedication. But obviously he gets very badly wounded in the process, and the movie does a good job of showing that even though this isn't real, it could be real, and the injuries that he gets could be real. And I mean, you could argue maybe there's a sort of plausible sort of deniability with in terms of him surviving some of these sequences, but I think that's more in the sequels. I think in the sequels is where the action gets more ridiculous, but for now at least, the action is brutal and believable, and that's what I like about it. And the set is really good. Like the skyscraper looks amazing, and again, the scope of the movie is impressive. I don't care too much for the other sort of side characters like the policemen, but they're fine. They're fine for what they are. My only sort of criticism of the movie, and maybe I was a bit harsh in my review, but I do stand by my criticism. I do think the sound mixing for this movie is a bit poor. Like sometimes it's really hard to hear the dialogue, and I have to keep adjusting my volume. And like when the action sequences come, the sound is really loud, but it seemed like it was sort of like from one extreme to the other, and it was kind of annoying. So I did have to knock a point off for that. But aside from that, this is a really, really great film. And
I mean,
I love.
uh, sorry, sorry to interrupt, but do you think maybe if you re-reviewed the film, you like bunk it up? Because I mean, I know nine's still very good, but I mean, yeah, I mean, personally, I wouldn't knock it off as sound mixing. I mean, I don't know if it was just like maybe it was the Blu-ray master or it was the film itself. Because like when I watch the film, like maybe there's a difference between the DVD and Blu-ray, but like, I mean, it's been a while since I rewatched it on Blu-ray, but I didn't really notice a sound issue. But yeah, I mean, that could just be the Blu-ray, or could maybe it's something to do with the film itself. But I mean, personally, it doesn't really bother me, but I can understand where you're coming from. Maybe you thought the audio was a bit too low or a bit too loud, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really feel like re-reviewing the movie at the moment, but you know, yeah, it was something that really just bothered me. I don't know why it was like that, and it definitely wasn't my TV because I kept adjusting the volume and I could hear the dialogue fine if I turned it right up, and then I had to turn it right back down when the sound effects came on, and it was just a bit distracting. So, I mean, irrespective of whether it was the film or whether it was the transfer, it was still annoying. So I'm sorry, I am going to stand by my 9 out of 10 rating, but that's still very good. That's still
Fuck you! No, I'm joking. Well,
it's still a very good rating. So, and it's easily the best of the series. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. And oh yeah, the song at the end, the let it snow and snow. I like that. I mean, it's kind of unusual to have that at the end, but yeah, I guess it kind of works for me because it is a Christmas movie. So, well, it's set at Christmas. Um, yeah. So yeah. But anyway, now we move on to the second film of the series, Die Hard 2, Die Harder. So Jack, take it away.
well, just before that, I have to say it's a disgrace that you gave the first one a 9, and you gave Soul no, joking.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, well,
how
I'm
could
not
you
going to be
give
finding
Soul a
yours for
10 out of
Christmas.
10? But how could you give Soul a 10 out of 10 and not fucking Die Hard? No, I'm joking.
Yeah. How could you give Asylum of the Daleks minus 1,000,000 out of 10?
well, I give it 0.
Yeah,
Joking.
same thing.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm letting you talk.
Yeah, no, I was only joking. Yeah, okay, Die Hard 2, Die Harder. I know a lot of people give this film some shit and say it's like a typical sort of Hollywood sequel. Um, you know, because it's essentially the same story as the first one. It's set in an airport. It's set at Christmas again, but I think Die Hard 2, Die Harder. I think it's underrated personally. I don't think it's as bad as some people make out. Some people think this film's shit, but I think the reviews of this are mostly positive. Like I know Siskel and Ebert were really enthusiastic about Die Hard 2, and Die Hard 2. It's definitely not as good as the first film. It's definitely not as good as the original Die Hard, but I would definitely take it over A Good Day to Die Hard and Die Hard 4. Sorry, Ollie, but I think Die Hard 2 is better than Die Hard 4. Um,
Oh, sorry seems to be the hardest word.
well, you fucking prick! No, chicken. No, yeah, no, I think Die Hard 2, Die Harder, it does, copy some elements of the first film, which is annoying.
Some.
Well, I mean, it doesn't copy everything from the first film, but it's set in an airport. It's at Christmas again. It's got terrorists. It does,
I mean,
kind of.
the fact that they have the same lead actor. I mean, that's just copying.
Yeah, no, it does recycle some elements from the first one, but I still think it's a good film. I think Die Hard 2 it kind of knows that it's the same thing. You know, that if you watch the trailer, there's that bit in the trailer where John McClane is like, "How could the same thing happen to the same guy twice?" You know, it's quite funny.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Um,
At least it's self-aware. I do give it that.
yeah, it's a self-aware sequel. Like, you know, they're not doing all this stuff and saying, "Oh, you know, the first one never happened." And there's that line where John McClane says, "Oh, we are just up to our neck in terrace again, John." You know, but I think the reason I take this, I think the reason I take this over Die Hard 5 and well, especially Die Hard 5 and Die Hard 4 is because Bruce Willis is still young. He's still got all this hair. He's still believable in the action scenes. I think with Die Hard 4 and Die Hard 5, some of the action is a bit CGI. Like there's that stupid scene in Die Hard 4 where he's standing on the wing of a plane, and I'm like, oh come on, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
I think some of the action in Die Hard 4 it's a bit more CGI, and like Bruce Willis isn't really in his prime. So I think that's why I prefer this one. But I just think it's a pretty good movie. I mean, I think the villains are pretty good in this. I know you said you're not a fan of the villains, but I quite like the general guy in this. Like, there's that. I mean, the way he, I mean, his opening scene is actually very weird. It's quite a, you know, a memorable way to introduce your villain. He's watching TV. He's watching TV and he's naked, doing some karate or whatever in his room. But,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, he is the best of the villains, but I mean, yeah, kind of brought flashbacks to the Uhura nude scene in Star Trek 5. Oh,
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a younger guy, and you know,
yeah.
so yeah,
And then
it's not
the
as
less
bad.
about that Star Trek 5 scene, the better.
Yeah, but I mean, as for the film itself, I mean, I think Bruce Willis is very good in this as John McClane. I think there's some. I think this film has some really great action scenes. I like the action scene where he sees those terrorists at the airport, and he sees these two guys, and he thinks they're suspicious, and he's fighting him in the luggage bay, like where they're loading all the luggage into the airport. He fights them, he like shoots them, and then we have
Oh yeah, that
this
fight is
cop.
awesome. I'll give you that. That is a really good fight.
Yeah, and he interacts with this cop in the film, who's this Italian cop or whatever. Like he basically runs the airport.
Thank God it wasn't Roberto Benigni.
Yeah, you know, or Marlon Brando, but yeah, no, but he's quite funny. I remember watching this with my dad, and he was laughing like when he's like, you know, I'll give you a fucking accommodation in L fucking A, and I'll get the fuck out of my fucking airport. You know, some of the dialogue here is pretty funny. Like you see that he doesn't really get on with John McClane. Like he knows that he's the guy who helped with the Nakatomi terrorist incident, but um yeah, he just thinks that John McClane's kind of out of his depth. Like he doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks that the airport's fine, and I just think there's some great lines in this movie, and I think Bruce Willis is very good in this as well. I think I think where the film suffers a bit is that it is kind of the same story. It's instead of terrorists in a skyscraper, it's terrorists in an airport, and we see that they take over this like church that's nearby the airport, and they're like using their equipment. And
would you agree in saying that? Sorry to interrupt you. Would you agree in saying that using the airport as a location? I mean, it's cool, but it's kind of generic, isn't it? Kind of the most obvious place you would expect terrorists to appear.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, it doesn't really bother me because I mean, where else are you going to go? I mean, you couldn't do it in a skyscraper again. Like that would just be too repetitive. So, I mean, I kind of like the airport.
They could go to the mall, like or Walmart, and see Harrison Ford. Came to change, please.
Yeah, but I mean, I do think. I mean, I like the setting of the airport. I mean, I like it's like snowing outside, and I think there's some interesting stuff there. Like these terrorists, they take over this local church and they set up their equipment and they're knocking down all these planes. But I mean, I think where the film suffers a bit is like, why did you need to bring back John McClane's wife again? I just kind of find it ridiculous that she's on this airplane, and
Yeah, why do they focus on her so much? It's like, and then there's even a scene when they try to make you think she's dead, or like but then they cut back to her a couple of minutes later, and it's like John's. It almost felt like they were trying to rip off Raiders of the Lost Ark, with Indy thinking Marion was dead. It kind of felt like that to me. I don't know. Did you get that vibe?
Not really, but I just don't. The thing I find ridiculous is in the first one she was in that building when the terrorists came in, and now she just happens to be um in this plane when terrorists are at this airport taking down these planes. And the fact that John McClane is in this airport and he just happens to stumble upon terrorists again, it is kind of ridiculous. It's kind of like, as if that would ever happen. But
Also, why is it set at Christmas again?
yeah, I don't know why. Like they just want to set at Christmas again. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe because they could use that song again, with Dean Martin, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
I mean, that was just like, come on. You're trying to be overly familiar now. You're not even hiding the fact that you're trying to be the same movie.
Yeah, I mean, I like the return of that black cop from the first one, the fat one who's eating the Twinkies. He's back in this, and I mean, he's helping John McClane. I mean, he's helping John McClane. I mean, he doesn't, I'm glad he isn't. I'm glad he isn't at the airport, but he like helps John McClane. Like he faxes him through some like fingerprints or whatever. But I mean, I do think the film is quite clever in some ways. I mean, there are some interesting things. Like, I do think it's interesting that terrorists they're basically saying, right, unless you do what we say, we're gonna crash all these planes. So I do like their demands. Like, you can tell the terrorists here, they're not dumb. They're basically saying we're gonna knock out all these planes, unless you tell us, unless you do what we say. We're gonna crash all these planes. And I do think there are some like great action scenes in there. I do really love that action scene. We've got like Robert Patrick from Terminator 2. He's in this film. There's that he's like one of these terrorists, and there's that great action scene where the scaffolding falls over and there's a shootout, and John McClane, he's stuck underneath the scaffolding, and there's like the gun on the gun's on the escalator or whatever it is. It's on the conveyor belt, and it's coming towards him. And the guy sees him go for the gun, and John McClane manages to get the gun and shoot him. I thought that was pretty good, and there are some pretty good action scenes in there. I do like some of the twists in the film. Like I do quite like John Amos in this film. He plays like the black general who comes in, and he's been sent to help out and stop the terrorists. And it turns out that he is in fact in league with the terrorists. There's that scene where they're in the car, the jeep, whatever it is, and this guy's questioning them, and he stabs him and he kills him, and that was pretty good. And I do think John McClane, it's quite interesting what he has to do in the film. Like he uses the gun, the machine gun, and it turns out there's like blanks, and he convinces your guy that the terrorists are there. It's nice to see Franco Nero in the film. Franco Nero's in Django and loads of other films, but he doesn't really get much to do. That is one criticism I'll give the film. Like Franco Nero's kind of wasted. But I mean, like I said, there are some great action scenes in the film. I do like some of the characters, like the janitor that John McClane comes across, and there's that reporter, and he tells her there's like terrorists, and she's like, "Oh, if you give me this story, I'll have your babies." That was kind of funny. But I mean, I do think there are some characters in there that are kind of pointless. Like they bring back the um news reporter from the first film. I didn't mention him when we were talking about the first Die Hard, but the news reporter in the first Die Hard, he comes back here, and it's the same actor who plays Walter Peck in the original Ghostbusters. Like he always plays these pricks in the movies during the 1980s, like Ghostbusters and Die Hard, and they bring him back, and there's that bit where he's in the plane and he finds out that there are terrorists, and he manages to get his mobile phone or whatever, and he's talking to the news station, and he tells them that he's in a plane and the terrorists are there, and he causes like a havoc. And there is a funny moment when Bonnie Bedelia She uses this taser or whatever it is, this cattle prod or something from this woman, and she uses it on him and knocks him out. And it turns out she had like a restraining order against him. That was kind of funny, but I don't know why they need to bring back so many characters from the first film. Like they all happen to be there when these terrorists are there. It's kind of ridiculous, but there is some great action in there. I love the action scene where John McClane he gets the ice pick and he stabs the guy in the eye with the ice pick. That's a really brutal action scene. It's really well done, and I do like the action scene where he's on board the plane and they throw grenades in and he uses the ejector seat and he manages to get out of the plane before it blows up in the ejector seat. That's pretty cool. So there's some like there's a lot of good action in the film, um, which I think is pretty cool, and I do think the film has a lot of stuff to keep you entertained, and there are some dramatic moments. I do really like the scene where the plane is about to crash and he gets out the landing lights and he's trying to warn them, and the plane crashes, unfortunately, and then his wife's plane, it's gonna crash as well, but they see the wreckage of the airplane, and he's like, "Oh, there's your fucking landing light." But I mean, that's towards the end of the film. Um, the film has a good pace to it. I mean, it's 2 hours like the first one. I don't know why it's called Die Harder though. Die Hard Two, Die Harder. Just call it Die Hard Two. Um, but the film is, it's well done. I think Rennie Harlan does a good job with the direction. I really like the final action scene where the terrorists they're trying to get away on the plane, and John McClane's fighting them on the wing of the plane, and he releases the petrol, and the petrol starts going everywhere, all over the snow, and that's definitely my favorite delivery of the line where he releases all the petrol from the plane, and as it's flying off, he's there in the snow, and he gets out the lighter, and he says, "Yippee motherfucker!" and he lights it, and the whole plane blows up, and it's a great action scene. And he's like, "There's your fucking landing light," and then the airplane with his wife in it, they're about to crash, but they see the plane blown up, and they manage to land safely. And the ending of the film, I think it's a bit similar, where they all arrive and his wife is there, and the guy rips up the ticket that he got earlier from his brother, and they're playing the song again, "Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow." Um, they did do a TV edit of this film. They did a really bad TV edit where where they edited out all the swear words, and instead of saying "Yippee ki Mister," instead of saying "Yippee ki motherfucker" at the end, John McClane says "Yippee ki Mister Falcon." It's just so bad, and it's not even Bruce Willis, and and they did some dubbing as well, where he's like, "If you move your fat feet when I told you to," it's like the dubbing, like they did for the TV edit, is really bad. Like it's online if you want to see it. Like Yippee ki Mr. Falcon. It's one of the worst things ever. But I think Die Hard 2, it does suffer in comparison to the first one. It's not as good as the first one, and I don't think it's as good as the next film, Die Hard with a Vengeance. But I still think it's a pretty good film. It's better than Die Hard 5, without question. I think it's better than Die Hard. I think it's better than Die Hard 4 as well, because, like I said, Bruce Willis is still in his prime, and all the action is done for real. None of it's like CGI. So even though it is derivative of the first film, and there is problems, like I said, bringing back the reporter from the first film, there's a lot of characters in this that didn't need to be there. They do recycle a lot of like scenes and characters from the first film, but I still think it's got a really good story. It's got great action. Um, the soundtrack's great. It's a really good film, in my opinion. It's a really good sequel. Not amazing, but some great action scenes like the snowmobile chase. Yeah, I almost forgot that as well. The chase with the snowmobiles, that was awesome. And the fight when he shoves the ice pick into the guy's eye, and um, there's so many great action scenes. in the film, and they also did a. Funnily enough, they judged the action scenes in the Die Hard films, and the only Die Hard film that John McClane would have survived is actually Die Hard 2. So it's probably the most realistic in terms of the injuries that he has, but it's a really fun film in my opinion. It's not as good as the first or the third one, but and that's because it does recycle a lot of elements from the first film, but it's still a pretty good film. So I'll close off by giving Die Hard 2, Die Harder 8 out of 10.
Die Hard 2. Fuck harder. Nice thoughts, Jack. That's great to hear. I'm sorry to be the one to burst your bubble, but I'm afraid I have to respectfully disagree slightly.
Well, fuck you!
Yeah, no. Look, I like this movie enough. It's better than the fifth one. So take that one. Take that as a comfort.
The fourth one.
I disagree, but we'll get to that later. Look, Die Hard 2, there was no way it was going to be as good as the first one, and it isn't. It's not as good as the first. But I did enjoy this movie somewhat. I mean, the action sequences were really, really good, and certainly the most original thing about the film, to be honest. Like Jack said, the snowmobile chase, the scene in kind of the baggage area, the climax on the plane, I have to say, was fucking amazing. That was probably my favorite scene in the movie. So in terms of it being
the bit
Sorry?
as well where I was gonna say, did you like the bit as well where like he's fighting the guy in the snow and he like shoves the ice pick in his eye? That was pretty good.
Oh yes, I did like that. Yeah, that was awesome. That was a pretty badass moment. And so McClane is really awesome in the movie. He's great, and Bruce Willis gets to do some really badass moments in the action sequences. But for me, that's as far as originality goes with this movie. For me, I kind of found this movie to be a bit of a disappointment, but I enjoyed it enough as a fun action movie. Like the action scenes are what sort of kept it from being a lower score for me. That being said, I kind of feel like this movie is overly familiar to the first. It's too similar.
I will agree with that.
Yeah, thank you. Even to the point where they use the same song at the end. It ends exactly the same way as the first one, except it's at an airport. I mean, why did they need to set it at Christmas again? Like, was it just because they were releasing it around Christmas? I don't know, but it seems pointless. But for me,
I think it actually came out summer 1990, so it doesn't really make much sense releasing it. You'd have set it at Christmas again.
Yeah, that is bizarre. I mean, to be honest, for me, I actually kind of struggled to get into this movie at first. I found the pacing of this film to be very uneven. That's where I do have to slightly disagree. I mean, I'm glad that you loved it, but for me, like 1 minute the movie would have loads of action, it'd be great, it'd be entertaining, and then the sort of story kicks in, and I kind of lost interest, to be honest, because it was just so similar to the first, and there was never a point where the film kind of grabbed me. I think the film took kind of too long to build up to the main events of the story, and whereas the first one sort of had 20 minutes to kind of act as a prelude, and then wham, we're into the situation. And I don't think the situation escalated in the same way in the second one. This might come across as petty, but I feel like the first movie, the tension increased and increased and increased to the point where you were like so adrenalized, and you were like, wow, yeah, this is awesome. You know, the blood was pumping. Whereas this, it was kind of up and down. It was kind of all over the place, which was a shame. So I did feel like there was a lack of stakes to this movie, despite the fact that they were trying to go bigger with some of the action sequences. So for me, the pace of the movie really lets it down. Also, the villains, I don't really care for them, to be honest. The general guy, I suppose, is the best one of the bunch, but even then, he's not given much time to flesh out his character. But the final fight between him and McClane on the plane is really cool. I do like that. But the other villains, I mean, they're not horrible. Just meh.
I will say this though about the general. I mean, I think John Amos is a really good actor, and I actually do like the twist that he is a bad guy because you think he's a good guy because he's come to get rid of the terrorists, and then it turns out he's a bad guy. And there's that scene I think you might agree, it's pretty brutal when he's in the jeep with the soldiers, and you find out he's a bad guy, and the guys are questioning him, and he just like slits his throat. It's pretty dark, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. Yeah, that is a pretty good scene. There are some good scenes in this movie, but it's just more of the same. There's not really much else to say. Also, Bonnie Bedelia's character. I forget her name actually. I can't remember the name of his wife.
Holly McLean.
What? Connie McLean.
Holly McLean.
Oh, Holly. Yeah, Holly. Sorry. Yeah, I mean she's okay, but there's every so often we'd cut back to her when she's on the plane and talking to some random guy, and all the stuff on the plane is really kind of unnecessary. I don't actually understand why it's in the film.
I don't. Sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you agree with me, but what the fuck was the point of bringing back the reporter from the first film? Like, they bring him back in the second film, and apparently he's got a restraining order against Holly McLean because she punched him at the end of the first film. And now he's like, he locks himself in the toilet of the plane, and he deliberately spreads panic by going on the phone call to this news studio and saying, "Oh, there are terrorists on the plane." It's like, what was the point bringing that like reporter guy back for the second film? I don't understand that, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was pointless. It was just an excuse to kind of give her more to do, I think. Because other than that, what could she have really done in the film? I don't think she really needs to be in it. I think they could have actually managed without her. It's not like she was entirely crucial to the first film, although she had a place in the first film at least.
I just think it's really stupid as well, though. I think it's really stupid in the third one that she divorces John McClane because this guy saved her life twice from terrorists. You think you want to be like married to him for like the rest of your life? Like,
yeah, I guess it's stupid, but on the one hand, also there's the fact is it's dangerous, and like she's been in danger 2 times with him, so I guess she doesn't want that sort of life anymore. The guy kind of attracts trouble, so I guess on that grounds.
If I was John McClane, I'd be like, "Bitch, I saved your life twice."
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and as for the rest of the film, like it's again like the scenes in the airport are okay, but for me the film really does drag. I think it drags in a lot of areas, and it's not long. It's only 2 hours, but it feels longer. It does start to feel a bit tedious at points, but I can't deny the action is amazing, and that's what really keeps it going. Watch it for the action because the action is entertaining, but don't expect a riveting plot. I mean, Bruce Willis is good as before, and I forgot to mention when we talked about the first one, the line that "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker." That's a classic line, of course. But yeah, for me, this one just didn't really. Not that it was bad, it just didn't cut the salami for me. I just I wanted more than just more of the same. It would have been nice for the movie to have been slightly more ambitious. I mean, it certainly was in terms of spectacle. It was more ambitious, but the story. It was kind of lazy. Not a bad story. Just come on. It was like it could have had more substance than just terrorists attacking an airport. That's basically it. There's not much else to it.
I don't know about you though. I think this probably has the most badass delivery of "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker" when he's on the plane and the guy kicks him off, like he's holding on to the petrol part, and all the petrol comes out of the plane, and there's like this line of petrol leading up to the plane as it's about to leave the runway, and he's just there with a lighter, and he's like, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker," and he just lights it, and then the whole plane blows up. That's like probably my favorite delivery of the line. I just think that's an awesome moment. But yeah.
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. There are great moments like that in this film. There are some really awesome badass moments, and that is one of them. The film is just really bogged down by its unoriginality, its poor pacing, and just lack of inventive story. And for me, like, not even the villains could keep it entertaining. I mean, the actor that plays the villain is fine, but they could have just made the general the villain from the beginning, because at least that would have given him more screen time, and they would have been able to flesh his character out more. But oh well, whatever. It is what it is. I mean, the direction by Rennie Harlan is okay. Like he tries his best, but I just think the script could have been a bit better. But it is an action movie, and it does feel a bit more like a sort of like it falls into that kind of category of sort of bland, generic Hollywood sequel. Like, and I really feel sorry in a way for it because the first one was so good, and it was such a kind of reinvention of this sort of action genre, and this one just kind of played it safe. Again, it's not terrible. I like it enough. I'd watch it again for the action, but I think the plot could have been so much more, as David Tennant
I mean,
says.
at least it's self-aware. At least it's self-aware that it is the same thing. But yeah,
Yeah, no, actually, yeah, you're right. It is. There is a self-awareness about it. So I appreciate that, and the action isn't as ridiculous as its forthcoming installments. Die Hard 5. We'll get to that shortly. But,
I think you will agree with me on one thing though, that Die Hard 2 has over Die Hard 4, and at least Bruce Willis has all his hair.
well, yeah, I mean, well, yeah. I'm not really bothered by the fact that he went bald. You know, I mean, that's age. It happens. It happens. It is what it is. But yeah, yeah. So I think Die Hard 2 it's very middle of the road. It's decent, but it's nowhere near as good as the first one. It's not the best of the series, though it's not the worst either. I did kind of find it a bit of a disappointment, but it was entertaining. So I'll give it a decent 7 out of 10, but I can't give it any more than that because I think there are a lot of problems. It's sort of heavily flawed, but yeah, it was worth seeing it. So anyway, we move on to the third movie of the Die Hard. I guess we have to call it a Die Hard anthology because there's like 5 movies, but yeah, or
well, I mean, we can call it no. We can call it a quadrilogy because the 5th one doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. So the middle film of this reflection is Die Hard 3, or Die Hard with a Vengeance. So I'll let Jack explain how great this movie is.
Well, Die Hard with a Vengeance. I think this is a really great sequel, and I think this is easily the best Die Hard sequel. For a time, I think this was my favorite Die Hard film because when I first saw the Die Hard films, I liked the first one, but I wasn't like hugely keen on it. And then the second one I thought was good, and then the third one
Some people actually do think this is the best of the series, to be fair. So you wouldn't be alone in that regard if you did change your mind.
Yeah, it's not my favorite like anymore, like it used to be, but it's definitely I think the second best of the series. I think John McTiernan did a really good job with this film. He did a really good job with the direction, and he came back after the first film. He didn't do Die Hard 2, and I think you could tell that it's John McTiernan directing this time because I think if he did the second one, he wouldn't have made it as overly familiar as Die Hard 2 was. But I think Die Hard with a Vengeance is a really good storyline. It's very original. I think Bruce Willis is really great in this film. This is supposed to be the last Die Hard film, and I think I just really like the story here. Like you find out that Jeremy Irons, he's this German who's after John McClane, and it turns out that he's the brother of Hans Gruber, and he's basically it's basically a game of cat and mouse. Like he's saying to him, "Oh, Simon says go to the phone booth. Simon says go down to the subway. Simon says you get the deal." And we see throughout the film that he's telling him that there's going to be a bomb in this underground subway carriage. There's going to be a bomb in a school and all this stuff. So there's a lot of interesting things going on in the script for this film. I think it's a really solid film. I think the acting as well is great by Bruce Willis. And I love the fact that they teamed him up with Samuel L. Jackson. This came out, I think, a year after Pulp Fiction. So this is when Samuel L. Jackson was becoming a big star. And he's really great in the film. And I think Bruce Willis is very good in this as well. It's interesting to see what's happened with John McClane. Like he's a bit of a wreck. Like he's an alcoholic. He's divorced from his wife. I mean, that's one thing I will say that's pretty stupid is the fact that his wife divorced him after the first two films. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, you know, he basically saved her life from terrorists twice. I mean, that's a guy you want to be with the rest of your life. You know, someone who could save your life from
Yeah.
terrorists twice. You know, I mean, you'd think that she'd be all over him. You think she'd be like, "Oh, John, you know, you saved my life from these terrorists. You're a Superman." You
Yeah.
know, "Oh, I love
I
you."
mean,
You know,
the thing is
you
as
think,
well, like they never really gave enough time for us to invest in their relationship anyway. But yeah, I mean, you think she would be a bit more grateful, but I guess she didn't want to be put in danger anymore. Maybe that's why, or maybe maybe it was a personal issue in regards to their daughter. I mean, well, who knows?
yeah. Well, what about their son?
Oh yeah, well that's another story. EastEnders
Yeah.
plot.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's really stupid though. After the first two films, that she would divorce this guy, like, especially when he saved her from terrorists twice. I mean, that's one nitpick I'll give the film is that it just doesn't make sense that she's divorced from him after the fact that he saved her life twice from terrorists. But I mean, I do think Bruce
Do you
Willis
know if
here
they
is
actually
very
asked
good.
the actress to come back? Is that why? Like, and she said no. Is that why they've written her out, or they just chose to write her out just because?
I don't know what it was. I mean, maybe I think Bonnie Bedelia would have returned, but maybe they just thought, well, we had her in the first two films. We don't really need her in Die Hard with a Vengeance. So, I mean, they explain later on that apparently they had an argument and he didn't call her back. And then Samuel Jackson says, "Oh, you should call her back." And apparently that was the reason they broke up, whatever. But, I mean, the way
Silly.
yeah. But I mean, the film, I think, like I said, has got a really great plot. I mean, I think Samuel L. Jackson is really great in this. There's that scene where Simon tells him to put on that sign that says "I hate N word." I hate N word. But yeah,
Yeah, we won't say the
yeah,
word just in case anybody's watching. But
yeah, and we see that he's standing in the middle of Harlem with the sign that says "I hate N word," and we see that Samuel Jackson comes up to him and he says, "Are you mad? You better get out of here." And the reason he's doing it is because Simon told him to. But there is a really funny edit of that on YouTube. There's an edit of that clip where he's standing in the middle of the street with this sign saying, "I hate Samuel Jackson," which is quite funny. But yeah,
well, funny enough, like they called the character Zeus, which is kind of a
yeah.
strange name to give him. But yeah,
Yeah.
I guess they they wanted him to be the god of lightning.
Yeah. I mean, I think his character's really good. Like, you can tell he's like a family man. He cares for his family. And it's kind of interesting. He's sort of like, John McClane says to him later on, "You don't like me because I'm white." He's like, I don't like you because you're going to get us killed. And you can kind of tell he's sort of into
Suck
like,
my big leg, Johnson.
I'm tired of these motherfucking sequels and this motherfucking Blu-ray set. But yeah.
God, Die Hard 6: The Return of Zeus.
Yeah. But you can tell he's sort of into like Malcolm X and all that stuff, like black nationalism. But I mean, I think his character's very interesting, and we see that they have to team up with John McClane, and I like the fact that it's kind of a buddy cop film in some respects. Like you got him and this guy Zeus, and I just think the story's great. I mean, there's a lot of great scenes. There's that scene where he's on the phone to Jeremy Irons as Simon Gruber, and he's telling him that there's a bomb in the dustbin, and they go to look for the bomb or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't say Simon Says," and he starts laughing, and and yeah, you have to basically do what Simon says throughout the film. There's some great action scenes. I like the action scene where they're in the underground and they're on the train, and there's a bomb on the train, and they have to throw it out of the train, and there's that bit where Zeus is like, I gotta use the phone. Give me the goddamn phone or whatever. And he like gets the gun out and he's pointing it at the guy, and he needs to use the telephone. And it's interesting because they're running around the whole city, trying to disarm these bombs. And there's a great scene where they find this briefcase, and Zeus says, "Oh, don't open the briefcase. You're going to activate the bomb." And he opens it, and it says, "Oh, hello, I'm a bomb. You've just activated me," which is quite funny. And then they have to get they have to get certain measurements of water. They have to put like three, pints in a 4 gallon, can. They have to put like 3 pints in a 4 pint gallon, and they have to get it exactly right. And if they don't, then it'll blow up. And they managed to do it. And I think Jeremy Irons, he's really great here. I mean, he's a great actor. I think he's very good as Simon Gruber. You believe that he's the brother of Hans Gruber and he wants revenge. But I like his storyline as well. He's not just trying to activate bombs throughout the city. He's trying to do what his brother did. Except this time he's after like gold. He's like after gold in the
Gold! Always believe in your soul.
yeah, troll. Always believe in your soul. No.
Oh, yeah.
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 But he's trying to get the gold, and and you see at one point that he's taken all the gold away, and there's just a lot of great stuff going on there. There's great action scenes. There's that scene where John McClane he's underground, and all this water starts to come towards him, and he uses the water. He manages to get out of there, and they have to find out the names of the presidents or something like that, and that was quite entertaining. Some great action scenes, and there's some tense scenes as well. There's that scene where Simon Gruber, he's got a bomb in a school, and they're going to blow up the school with the kids in it. And I think Zeus's kids or whatever, they get stuck in one of the classrooms, and they have to get them out. And it turns out that it isn't a bomb. It's like some kind of, I don't know what it is. It's like some kind of, I think it's maple syrup, and they say that was inside the thing that made it look like a bomb. And he says, "Oh, McLean, do you really think I'm that heartless? I may be a terrorist, but I'm not going to blow up kids." And he basically tricked them into thinking he was going to blow up this school, and that was really well done. And I just think, Sam Jackson is great, and Bruce Willis, they're both really good in this film. They both give really charismatic performances. Some great lines as well. There's that bit where Bruce Willis, like, his vest is all dirty, and he says, "Oh, laundry day." It's quite funny. And there's that bit where he's in the lift, and he knocks out those guys, and he kills them all. And there's a great confrontation towards the end where they get on the boat, and they're going down a zip line, and I think one of the guys gets cut in half by like the zip line or whatever. He's got a machine gun. That was quite funny. And the action's great. I mean, you find out that Samuel Jackson needs to take aspirin or whatever because he's got a headache, and at the end we see that they managed to get off the boat before it blows up. And the ending of this is quite interesting because they originally filmed a different ending where like it's like months later, and he finds Simon Gruber at this hotel in Switzerland. But we find out in this film that John McClane, we see that Zeus says to him, "Oh yeah, call your wife," because like that's how they fell out, because he didn't call her back, and he's about to call her back. Then he looks at the bottom of the aspirin and he finds out where the villain is, Simon Gruber. It's a bit convenient, it's a bit convenient after he's stolen all this gold and everything that he just looks at the bottom of this aspirin bottle, and he finds out where he is because he used that aspirin as well. He gave it to Zeus or whatever. But
if only it was that easy.
Yeah. But I do like the finale of the film where, there are the helicopters there, and they and he shoots down the helicopter, whatever it is. He's like, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker!" And he's like, "Say hi to your brother from." I think he says, "Say hi to your brother from me," and he kills him, whatever, blows him up in the helicopter, whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, I think Die Hard with Vengeance is a really great film. It's not as good as the original. I wouldn't say it's as good as the first film, but it's very close. I think my only complaint would be like maybe the ending is a little bit rushed, but apart from that, I think it's a really good film. It's a really good sequel to the first film. Definitely the best sequel of the franchise. So I'll close off by giving Die Hard with Vengeance a 9 out of 10.
Pie hard with a vengeance. And we will pie hard. Certainly at the end of September with no time to die. But yeah.
There's
As
just
for
no time for pie.
yeah. Oh, no time for pie. That's going to be a great sketch. Anyway, back on track. Sorry. Die Hard 3, Die Hard with a Vengeance. Fantastic sequel. Really good. Not perfect. I don't think it's a 10 out of 10, but it is really good. It's not as good as the first one, but it's still, for me, much better than the second one. And I really like the fact that John McTiernan came back, and the fact that he really saw that I think that Die Hard 2 was just kind of the same, and I think he wanted to make something that was more original, and I think he did that. It still has all the spectacle and all the action that the first one had, but I actually think arguably it's sort of a bit more intriguing than the first one in a way, because it has the first half of this movie is a really intricate kind of build up with this sadistic kind of cat and mouse game called Simon Says, and I loved the tension of that, and I really think that they should have run that for longer, because I really enjoyed seeing McClane and Zeus kind of shit themselves with the prospect of trying to do all these things so quickly before people got hurt, and it definitely added to the stakes, and I really appreciated that. So this one really raised the stakes, and I also like the fact that this movie had a kind of mild commentary on race relations, certainly at the beginning with the sign. I won't say the word for anyone of the black community, because that would be offensive. But it's a good way to sort of get the characters to meet each other. And obviously Zeus is kind of an ordinary guy. Like I like the character a lot because he's just this normal guy. He just works in a hardware store or something. Well, not a hardware store, like I think a DVD shop or something. And he's just a normal guy who gets caught up in all this. Like he has no intention to be there, but he's witness to a horrible event, and McClane is they just meet by accident, and it's great. But they have a lot of great chemistry, and I like the fact that, as you said, Jack, that this one is a buddy cop movie, and it really works, and it shows that John McTiernan tried to do something really different with Die Hard and tried to kind of make it seem more original, and like the franchise was still fresh, and it wasn't just going to be pure spectacle for the sake of it, anymore. It wasn't going to be just the same. And I mean, yeah, the second half certainly goes more for the action, and you get your spectacle, and that's where I think the first half I actually preferred because it was more intriguing and it was building up to something. And when we actually meet the villain Simon, who is Simon Gruber, I should say, because he's Hans Gruber's brother. Jeremy Irons was a great choice. I think he was a very good choice. I mean, I don't think he's as good as Hans Gruber, but I still really like him, and his German accent is kind of amusing as well. The fact that he's kind of on the phone for most of the first half of the movie until a certain point when he is revealed on a rooftop, I think. But he's very nasty. He's a very nasty character, very threatening, and he definitely proved to be a very good adversary for McClane and Zeus. And yeah, I think he's definitely the second best villain of the Die Hard franchise. Certainly much better than the villains of the second film. The climax for me was quite long-winded. I didn't think they really needed the final helicopter chase. They could have cut that out probably, but it was still great, and it was still entertaining, and all the action is once again brilliant. I mean, Die Hard never fails to deliver on the action, and there's plenty of it. So this movie isn't going to bore you. It's certainly not going to bore you, but I just like the build-up for this one. I think this one had the most intriguing build-up because it had the game of Simon Says, and I just like the fact that they called him Simon. That's just inspired. That's genius. That's a really clever thing to do. And yeah, I do agree about the situation in regards to John and Holly in terms of their marriage being divorced. Well, their marriage now being divorced. Yeah, they've divorced, which is that comes out of nowhere, really. I mean, whether it was to do with the fact that Bonnie Bedelia wasn't returning, or maybe they'd asked her and she said no, or maybe they just didn't feel the character had a place in the story anymore. I don't know. I guess they wouldn't have had much of a role for her anyway, even if she was in it. So yeah, I could see why maybe they didn't choose to have her in it, but it is left kind of unexplained. So I kind of understand that. But one of my favorite sequences is when they go into the subway and try and stop the bomb from going off on the train, and then they have to go to the school, and then he's just sending them round and round and round the whole of New York, which is kind of hilarious, but also tension filled at the same time. And I think Die Hard 3 has some of the best comedy of the series. I think that the comedy is very on point for most of the time. Like Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson have really good chemistry. I kind of wish he'd come back at some point because I think Zeus would have made a good sort of partner for him in the Force. Maybe he could have joined the Force at the end, or oh well, it doesn't matter. But still, Die Hard 3 is fantastic. The script is really good. It's paced much better than the second one. It's directed much better than the second, and the action is also amazing. And it certainly tries to be the biggest one so far. Like with the fact that it's not just set in one place; it goes all the way around New York, which is great. And they even go on the boat, like they're driving around. They go underground in the subway. They definitely tried to add some more variety into this one, which I certainly appreciate. So that's kind of all I've really got to say about it. So I guess I will score Die Hard with a Vengeance probably a 9 out of 10. Very, very good sequel. Very impressed with it. I suppose I can see what you mean about the ending. It is a bit abrupt, but yeah. Anyway, now we move on to Die Hard 4 or 4.0 or Live Free or Die Hard, depending on what you want to call it. This movie was actually released in 2007, so quite a long time after the third one. I think initially the third was meant to be the last, but I guess Hollywood had other ideas about that, lol, and decided to eventually get another one greenlit and have it made for, 2007. And I guess, of course, Bruce Willis needed some money, so yeah, why not? I guess he thought he could do it another, for a fourth time. I don't know if it was necessarily trying to relaunch the franchise. I suppose it was a good idea to bring it into the 21st century with a different sort of plot, but we'll discuss that in just a sec. But I will hand the mic over to Jack. So, Jack, what do you think of Die Hard 4?
Well, Die Hard 4 or Die Hard 4.0 or Live Free or Die Hard if you're American. Well, Die Hard 4, I think it's a good film, but for me it's one of my least favorites of the series. I think it's better than the second film. Oh, sorry, I think the second film is better than Die Hard 4, but it's definitely better than A Good Day to Die Hard. I still think it's a good film. I mean, this film came out 12 years after the Die Hard with a Vengeance in 2007, and Bruce Willis, he was on Jonathan Ross back in 2007, and he said initially, he wasn't going to do Die Hard 4. The third one was meant to be the last one, and he wanted to get another film off the ground. So we said to the studio, "Look, I'll do another Die Hard film if you help me fund this film." So we did Die Hard 4, and there's a lot of fans who actually don't like Die Hard 4. There's a lot of people who think it's shit. Like, I know Sam doesn't like Die Hard 4. And I know a few other people who aren't a fan of it. Like Mark Hamill called the Die Hard 4 pointless. But yeah, I think it's a good film though, and I like how it deals with cyber terrorism. The fact that it's dealing with terrorism and the sort of changing face of terrorism, and it's very relevant nowadays because we have cyber terrorism with like the Russian hacking back in 2016 and Kim Jong Un and all that, North Korea. Like, there's a lot of cyber terrorism now, so it's a very up to date storyline, and I think it works for Die Hard because, um, and I think the
I mean,
tagline of
it
this
does
film.
sort of seem like the most obvious plot to go for, doesn't it? But it is relevant, like you say. I mean, what else could they have done, really? Gone back to the airport. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the tagline for the poster was like an analog hero in a digital age. So it's kind of interesting that John McClane, he's used to terrorists, fighting them in real life. He's not used to like terrorists like hacking computers and stuff like that. And I do think Bruce Willis, he still got it. I mean, he is older now, and I mean, you could argue maybe he's a bit too old to be playing this character. I mean, he's a bit of an old fart in this film, um, you know.
Yeah,
But
clearly he's stressed because he's lost all his hair. So yeah, he's obviously going
yeah, I
through
mean,
a crisis doing another Die Hard film.
that's one reason I think I'd probably take the second film over Die Hard 4 is because he's not in his physical prime like in the first three Die Hard films. Like, at least in Die Hard 2, he had all his hair and he was physically still quite buff and he was a young guy. With Die Hard 4, you could tell that he's getting on a bit and he's bald now and he kind of looks like an angry American version of Phil Mitchell. But
Yeah.
but I mean, the way the film begins
Yeah,
is quite
motherfucker. My Scotch
yeah.
eggs sausage rolls.
Yeah, but I mean, I like the begin. I like the beginning of the film where like his daughter's like in the car with her boyfriend and they're kissing, and he like throws him out, and she gets annoyed at him. And yeah, I mean, he did have kids in the other films. I think he had like a son and a daughter in the first Die Hard, but we see her for the first time, and we see that he's very annoyed with her, and then we see that he goes to answer this call, and we're introduced to Justin Long's character, who's this hacker, and he's kind of one thing I will say, Justin Long, he's kind of annoying in this film as the hacker. He's just sort of this, geek hacker guy, and
Yeah,
you know,
he's almost like kind of a Ben Whishaw reject. He's not. He's trying to be the American version of Q from Skyfall. Although I know this movie was released before Skyfall, but still, it kind of reminded me of Ben Whishaw a little bit. And I think they're trying to go for a buddy like they did in the third film. It just doesn't really work. They're just two different characters.
yeah, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I think his character is a little bit annoying. I mean, I don't know if you agree with me, but like, do you think he comes across a bit too geeky?
I don't really know, to be honest. I guess he seems to be kind of like a know-it-all. He seems to know, quite a lot about computers. Maybe he seems like too kind of conveniently intelligent for the situations that they're in. He's able to, flick a few buttons on the computer and then solve the problem. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe they should have gone with somebody. I guess they had to go with someone young for the modern age, but I don't know, like just with Bruce Willis, I think the characters are so different and so unlike each other and so far apart in age that I don't know, as a duo, they just don't really work together. Whereas at least Samuel L. Jackson was a similar age, so they had a bit more banter. But yeah,
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think Justin Long's just a bit annoying in this film. He's just a stereotypical geek. He's into Marvel comics and Spider-Man and everything, and he's this hacker. He's just kind of a stereotype of a geek, and I just don't know if he really works with Bruce Willis. I think you're right. Bruce Willis is a bit too old for him, and in terms of age,
oh,
like where Samuel Jackson was.
we're making it sound like they're gay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe that's why they call it Die Hard.
Oh God. Sex for dinner, death for breakfast.
Yeah. Die Hard on. Yeah.
Die Hard
Yeah.
another day.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think it's a good film. I think like I said, some of the action in this film is a bit too CGI for me. I think that's another reason why I take the second one over this film is because there are some action scenes here that are kind of unbelievable. There's that like action scene in the apartment where he throws the fire extinguisher, and there's just some action scenes that are just way too CGI in the film for me.
Say they kind of seem a bit silly, like.
Yeah, I think this is where the action starts to get a lot more over the top, like more CGI and more cartoonish, if you know what I mean. Like you can just kind of tell when the CGI is there, and it's kind of a little bit annoying at points. But I mean, I do like some of the stuff in there, some of the dialogue where they're listening to like Creedence Clearwater, and he's like, "Oh, that's classic rock," and they're in the car, and they arrive at Washington or whatever, and they find out there's this like ex-CIA or FBI guy who's become a hacker against them. And I think Timothy Oliphant, I think that's it. Yeah, he's very good
Yeah,
as he's pretty good as a villain. And
yeah,
one thing I will, yeah, and one thing I will say as well is though with Die Hard 4 is that I'm kind of annoyed that it's only like I'm kind of annoyed the fact that it doesn't have as much swearing and like bloody violence as the other Die Hard films. That they try to, I think they were trying to get more people into the theater with this film. They were trying to get like younger kids into Die Hard, so they like I think it's like a 12 or something like that. Where the other Die Hard films
yeah.
like 15 or 18,
I
and
think, yeah, to be honest, that's probably because of the nature of the story, the fact that it's slightly younger cast than aside from Willis, and the fact that it's about computers and cyber terrorism. It's more relevant to the younger age or the age that are online. So I guess I can see the logic, but yeah, as a hardcore Die Hard fan, you think, oh, okay, yeah, where's the fake blood? Where's the ketchup? It's just, yeah. I suppose it takes you out of the realism in a way, and I think this is where the series goes. It goes a little bit unrealistic, but not as much as the fifth one.
yeah, I would agree with that. I just think the film, it isn't, it doesn't have as much swearing as the other films. It isn't as gory and as realistic with some of the violence. And I just think Bruce Willis at this point, I mean, he's still really good as John McClane, but he's getting on a bit. I mean, he's not a spring chicken anymore. He's a bit of an old fart playing John McClane, but
An old
I mean,
fart.
yeah. I mean, the action's good, and I do like the action. I think Timothy Olyphant's a good villain. There are some really great action scenes. I love the action scene where they're in the car and he smashes the car into the helicopter. And he's like, "Oh, you just killed that helicopter with a car." I mean, it's a pretty cool action scene, but again, it's kind of it's kind of a bit obvious that it's CGI. But I mean, the action there is good, and I do like some of the action later on. There's that sexy Chinese girl, and she's like fighting John McClane, and I think he kills her at one point. Like he drops the car down the air vent, and he blows up. And you
Yeah.
also have
How could a car fit down the? Well, I guess it would have to be the elevator shaft.
yeah, yeah, something like that. So yeah, some of the action is a bit more unbelievable, but I do like some of the characters. I mean, it's kind of funny to see Kevin Smith in this film. The filmmaker, and he was also in Clark's that film, and he Jay and Silent Bob and all that. He sort of makes those kind of like dude movies, like dude, like 90s movies.
Yeah, well, Bill and
Um,
Ted.
yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah. Um, But I mean, he kind of plays this sort of stereotypical hacker. He lives in his mother's basement. He's a he's a Star Wars fan. He talks to Bruce Willis about Yoda and all that stuff. And apparently Kevin Smith, like he did a film a few years later with Bruce Willis, Cop Out, which I've reviewed on my channel, which is absolute shit. But Bruce
Mm.
Willis got really angry with him during the making of that film, and Kevin Smith just says that Bruce Willis is a douchebag, and apparently Bruce Willis said to Kevin Smith when they were out in the street, like people were calling Bruce Willis's name, and he says, "I hate the people who say Die Hard the most." And yeah, Kevin Smith just doesn't really like Bruce Willis, but I mean his character that he plays is like hacker. I mean he's kind of a stereotype. I mean that's kind of the annoying thing about Die Hard 4 is you kind of got these like geeky hackers who can do anything. Like Justin Long's character, he can just hack everything. Like he can get through every security pass and firewall, and he can hack everything, and it's kind of ridiculous to be honest. But um, like I said, the action's good. I do like John McClane's daughter in this film. She's quite good, and I like how she fights back. She doesn't really take any shit from Timothy Oliphant, and I do like the ending of the film. I think the ending of the film is pretty good, where he's in the warehouse and he's pointing the gun. He says, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker!" And he shoots him through his shoulder and kills him. Well, they're saying that like on the DVD and Blu-ray they censor out the motherfucker, but they have done an uncut version of Die Hard 4 where you hear him saying motherfucker. But yeah, I mean that was kind of cool. I did like the ending where they defeated him, and I think the soundtrack's pretty good as well. I think it is relevant. I think it's I really like the idea of cyber terrorism and updating it for the modern age. And I mean, there are some stupid scenes in there. There's that whole action scene where there's that fighter plane going after them, and he's in the truck, and John McClane he jumps onto the wing of the airplane. I'm like, okay, come on, that's ridiculous. He's Bruce, Bruce Willis is like in his 40s now, and he's on the wing of this like fighter jet as it's like spinning around. And you can tell it's like CGI. It's like bit dodgy there, but some of the action is really good though, and it's an enjoyable film. I still really enjoy it. I think this is the last good Die Hard film, and to me, it's the last film in the series because the next film is just yeah. But yeah, I mean, so in conclusion, I think Die Hard 4, it's a pretty good film. It's just not my favorite. It's definitely my second least favorite because I think, like I said, Bruce Willis, he isn't really in his prime anymore. He's a lot older. He doesn't have his hair. I mean, I know he's bald now, but I mean, he's a bit older now. Maybe he's a bit too old to be playing this character. I think some of the action for me is kind of where it's let down a bit. Some of the action is way too CGI. That's one thing I'll give Die Hard 2 over this film is that all the action is done for real. It's no CGI, and I do think cybersecurity, that cyber terrorism, that's pretty cool. But I don't really like the fact as well that it's they try to make it more towards a family audience by making it a 12. The action is less graphic. Like there's less bloody violence. Like there's no guys being killed with an ice pick shoved in their eye. There's none of that. There's no swearing, and yeah, and I just think Justin Long's. I mean, I kind of like his character, but at the same time, he's just kind of this geeky, know-it-all. Like he can hack through everything, and there's some kind of stereotypes of geeks, like they're all living in their mother's basements and they all love Star Wars. It's a bit cringy, to be honest. So, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in there, but there's a lot of stuff in there I just think weighs it down. Like I said, some of the action is too CGI for me. I think Bruce Willis is a bit past it at this point. I just think the fact that it's not as bloody and as violent, and they don't swear as much as the other Die Hard films. It kind of doesn't feel as much as a Die Hard film, but I mean,
this movie should have been the last one. I think there's no point continuing after this.
Yeah, I mean, I think Die Hard probably should have stayed as a trilogy, but I mean, I don't mind it as a quadrilogy. I think this should have been the last one. But unfortunately, they decided no, make another one, which we'll get to in a minute. But overall, I think A Good Day to Die Hard. It's a good film. It's just not great in my opinion. Sorry, not A Good Day to Die Hard. Oh God, because I was talking about the next film in the series. Yeah,
I never thought I'd hear you say that.
Yeah, no, it's because I was mentioning the next film in the series, so I said that instead of Die Hard 4. But yeah, in conclusion, Die Hard 4.0 or Die Hard 4 Pointless, as Mark Kermode called it, or Live Free or Die Hard. I think it's a good film. I think it's a solid entry. It's just not as good as the first 3 Die Hard films, in my opinion. So I'll close off and I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. As for me, yeah, I can see where you're coming from. Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but I actually kind of like this one a bit more than you do. I think we're kind of reversed on Die Hard 2 and 4, but yeah, I do agree that with some of what you said, yeah, Bruce Willis is kind of past it by this point. He's getting a bit too old to do this stuff now, and the action is kind of over the top and ridiculous this time. It's getting to the point where you kind of struggle to believe some of it, but there are some action scenes I like, and it's definitely more high octane than it has been in the past. And there's a bit of blood, but there's not a huge amount. And they've kind of watered it down, I think, purposely to sort of get more of a young like teen guy audience into the franchise, but they haven't really catered towards the fans of Die Hard, like who have probably grown up with the first three movies. But yeah, I mean, you could argue it does feel kind of more of the same, and I suppose it is, but I like the idea of cyber terrorism, and it came at the right time, I think, because like sort of 2006, 7 was when sort of things in the internet started to pick up and move on, and it was released at the right time, which I think is important, and it definitely raises awareness of cyber terrorism. But yeah, other than that, it is kind of more of the same. You know, John McClane's just doing his thing, just another day at the office. I mean, we get to see a bit of relationship drama with him and his daughter, which is kind of nice, but it's only one scene at the beginning. Um, but I like the actress that plays his daughter. I think they have a good rapport together on screen. Justin Long's character, he's okay. I think his name is Matt, but I'm not quite sure. I can't remember, but he's a computer hacker, and he's kind of like, again, sort of caught up in all this. And I think they're trying to repeat the third film a bit with making it a buddy cop movie, but this time Willis and Long, they don't really have any chemistry, and they don't bounce off each other very well. They just seem very mismatched, and I don't think it works. And it just kind of it does get a bit boring, I suppose, when you see them after a while. But I actually really liked the villain this time. I thought Timothy Oliphant was a pretty decent villain, and he definitely put up a good challenge towards the end. I mean, certainly the climax was very intense and engaging when he was confronting Justin Long's character and McClane's daughter. Bruce Willis, I don't think he really cares anymore. I mean, you know, he's doing his thing. He at least he's still pretending to look interested. So I'll give him credit this time, but the next time he won't care. But again, it's unbelievable how much of this he survives. To be honest, it's just kind of not plausible anymore. Same with Indiana Jones 5. When that comes out, that's not going to be that's not going to be plausible at all. Yeah, I thought it was entertaining, and I really enjoyed the ride. And again, the plot was more intriguing to me than the second one, and I actually thought the pacing was better than the second, personally. Even though it does drag on a bit in a few places, but yeah, I could see what they were going for, and it certainly was. It certainly seemed like the right direction to go in to kind of bring the series into the modern day, into the 21st century, and that's fine. That's great, but it isn't perfect. It does have some pacing problems, and the action is kind of over the top by this point. Certainly, the scene when I think the actress is Maggie Q. The car, I think it's the car falls on her or something down the elevator shaft. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, especially the final fight with McClane on the is it the helicopter or the plane? Like he's on the side of that or something, and that's I didn't really get that. A man of his age, I didn't really get that. I don't have much else to say about it. I think Timothy Olyphant's very good as the villain, and I think it's where the series should have stopped. I think it's a good ending point, and I think it has enough closure, like at the end, for it to feel complete, and certainly gives you the sort of hint that McClane's daughter and Justin Long might have a thing going forward. But we never actually saw him again. We never saw Justin Long's character again. We saw McClane's daughter in the fifth movie, but yeah, it was never to be taken further. I mean, I guess at the time they probably didn't know they were going to do a fifth one, but yeah, I thought Die Hard 4 was an entertaining film, but it really is sort of the last movie of this franchise, as far as I'm concerned. I could see why you would say it's not a true Die Hard film, and how some people would probably be turned off by this movie, because it does feel like a kind of more PG-13 sort of watered down version of the first three films, but at least the plot is more modern, more contemporary. It's definitely the most contemporary of the series, and unlike the fifth one, at least it tried to do something different, and at least it tried to have some kind of different premise with the plot. But yeah, so I guess I'll probably finish up, and I'll give Die Hard 4 quite a low 8 out of 10, but I still enjoyed it. It was still a decent enough sequel, and very, very fun. And I personally enjoyed it a bit more than the second one. but that's just my opinion. So we come to the fifth and thankfully final movie of this series. Although never say never, but A Good Day to Die Hard. Oh, fuck. Oh, shit. So I'm gonna hand this over to Jack. Oh man, what? I don't even need to ask you what you think of this movie. Just let her rip.
It's the best Die Hard film in the series. 10 out of 10. Okay,
Sorry,
what do you
just
think,
give me
Ollie?
1 second.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 for me. What would you give it?
I give it probably a minus 50 and a fucking plane crash and a fucking earthquake out of 10. I don't know. It doesn't deserve any appraisal.
Yeah, a good day to kill the franchise, as I like to call it.
Yeah, time to call it a day to die hard.
Yeah. A good day to kill the franchise is just. Well
Bravo.
done. Well done. You know, it's definitely the last Die Hard film, I think, because it's been 8 years since this film came out, and oh boy, it's just really this film to me just doesn't feel like a Die Hard film. Like you were saying, at Bruce Willis, you felt didn't really feel like John McClane, the last one, that he sort of like sort of farting his way through that. You know, here I actually think I actually thought in the fourth one, he still felt like John McClane. He still felt like that same character. Here, it's just Bruce Willis is completely phoning it in. I mean, he's just completely does not feel like that. He doesn't feel like the same character. I mean,
Yeah,
it may
he
be
doesn't
the
give a
same
shit.
actor. Yeah, it may be the same actor and everything, but he just does not feel like John McClane. Like even in the fourth film, even though he didn't have all his hair, he was older. I still felt like he was the same character because he still felt like a human being. He still felt like you could beat him up, and he still felt like a flawed character. And he had that John McClane, wit about him. He had the one-liners and everything. But here he's just, Bruce Willis going through the motions, and the film itself is just garbage. It really is. It's one of the dumbest. It's just one of the dumbest action films I've ever seen. I just think the storyline here, I just don't care about. Like this Russian guy
Yeah.
wants to get
The
the
story's a fucking
plutonium.
convoluted mess. Something about like what is it like uranium or something? Like they're
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like uranium. Like this guy, I forget his name, but this guy with like glasses, this Russian dude, he wants to get some uranium, and yeah, that's all I can really remember from this film. I haven't seen it in a few years, but it's so forgettable. It's such a forgettable movie. The action here is just gratuitously dumped on screen. It's just CGI. It's just CGI shit flying about, and it's like watching a Transformers film. It's just no effort put into the action scenes. Like at least the first three films and even the fourth film, you can tell they put effort into the storyline and the action scenes. Here, it's like, oh well, let's just make another Die Hard film, and that's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like, oh, let's make a great film. It feels like let's just make another Die Hard movie, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, that's not really working out, is it? And I just think the story is just crap. I think the characterization here is awful. I mean, seriously, setting it in Russia, and they had that fucking awful tagline in the poster: "Yippee ki Mother Russia." Like, oh god, yeah,
It's
oh
actually pretty
god,
good to be fair.
yeah. But it's like, why is this in Russia? Like all the other Die Hard films are set in like New York, sort of L.A. kind of. They were all
Well, it could
set
have
in
been worse.
America.
They could have done an Indiana Jones and just gone with the Nazis again. But yeah.
Yeah, well, oh yeah, we're gonna have the Nazis for the third time in the fifth one, but yeah. This film though, it feels like they're running out of ideas. It feels like they've run out of ideas. I think Jai Courtney is terrible in this film as John McClane's son.
He's a
He's
terrible
just
actor in general, to be honest.
yeah. I mean, he was crap in Terminator Genesis, and I mean, I've seen him in some things that he's not bad in. I mean, I thought he was good in Suicide Squad as Captain Boomerang. That's probably his only good performance, but he's just crap here as John McClane's son. And the whole storyline is just bollocks. Like, oh, it's father and son reuniting to stop the bad guys. Oh, so cliche. Like you said in your review, or your rant, you said, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, that's a way better father and son movie, action movie. You know,
Yeah.
you want it's like, yeah, you want to see a good action movie about father and son. Watch Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade because you don't get it here. A good day to kill the fucking franchise, and the action here just sucks. Like there's that ridiculous scene where I think it's John McClane or his son. He's driving through Moscow and he's slamming into all these people in cars. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? It's like John McClane would not do that. He would not just risk all these people's lives, like slamming into their cars, driving this big ass truck. I mean, how many people did he kill doing that? And then there's that ridiculous scene where that guy comes out of the truck and he starts talking to John McClane because he's in the middle of the street, and he starts talking to him in Russian, and John McClane punches him, and he's like, "Do you think I understand a word you say?" And it's like, oh god, uh, like why would he do that? Why would John McClane punch a guy because he didn't understand what he's saying? He's John McClane. He's not a dick. I mean, he's not like they just make him into this reckless arsehole. And there's that scene where he's like, Jack! And he sees his son, Jack McClane, and he's like, oh, Dad? Like, it's so cliche. And the action here is just awful. There's that terrible scene where they're in that building and they jump out a fucking window, like John and Jack McClane. They jump out the fucking window and they fall like 10 stories or 7 or 6 stories, whatever the fuck it is. And they land in this, like, bin and they're fine. It's like, what? So they have like no broken bones, no scratches. Like, oh my god, this is ridiculous. This is fucking ridiculous. And that's what the
You could
movie
say
is.
that again.
And that's what the movie is. It's just so fucking ridiculous. It's so fucking stupid. The villain is just fucking nothing. Like you think throughout the film that he's a good guy, and then at the end, oh, it turns out he's a bad guy and he's after uranium. And it's like, I don't give a fuck. Like he goes to Chernobyl or whatever, and then we see that John McClane and his son are in Chernobyl, and they're not wearing any radiation suits. So what? Is John McClane now? Is he invincible to radiation? Like seriously? It's like Chernobyl. There's like a nuclear meltdown there back in the 80s, and they're just
Mm.
going in there and they're not wearing any radiation suits. It's just so dumb, and the action towards the end is awful. Well, I think one of them's in a helicopter, and the villain falls to his death from the top of the building or whatever it is, and it's like I don't care. I just don't care. And the film is just it's a disaster. It really is. I mean, the action is just awful. John McClane, I mean, Bruce Willis, he doesn't care anymore. He's just doing this for the paycheck. He's just doing this, because it's another Die Hard film and I'll make some money. It's like, oh
Yeah,
god.
yeah. Doesn't do anything for
And
my
actually,
wallet.
yeah. And Bruce Willis, I saw an interview afterwards, after this film came out, and they said, "Oh, is this going to be the last Die Hard film?" And he's like, "No, I'd like to do a couple more of these films." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know you want to make some more money, but
You must be
it's just
desperate.
it was so shit that it didn't even do that well at the box office. All the other Die Hard films did well at the box
And I
office.
think
This
it was
one
released in
bombed.
February as well. That's probably why it was released in this shit time.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also because it's a crap film. That's why it didn't make money. It's just it bombed at the box office, and I think worldwide it did well, but in America it did very badly. And it just goes to show that this franchise is on its knees. I mean, it's really frustrating as well because the first three Die Hard films were actually really good films. Sorry, and the fourth one as well. That was a pretty good film too. So it's just kind of annoying when you've got all these other films that are all pretty good. Like I think all the other Die Hard films range from good to excellent, and to have this film that's just so shit, and it's just the characters here are just terrible. Like I said, Jai Courtney is awful as Jack McClane. I don't buy this relationship, this father-son relationship at all between him and Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis doesn't even feel like John McClane. At least in the fourth film, he was still believable. He still felt like a human character. He's not like a Superman who could jump out a window from a 10-story building or whatever it is and survive. And it's such a forgettable film. It's so shit. It really is awful. I mean, the only things I could say in it is like maybe a decent soundtrack, some decent action moments in there, but it's crap. So
Hardly worth your time.
yeah. So I'll give a good day to kill the franchise. I mean, a good day to Die Hard. I mean that's a shit name as well. A good day to Die Hard. What the fuck does that even mean? Ugh, God. I'll give a good day to Die Hard a 2 out of 10. But yeah, it's just crap. But
Well, you give it a 2, I give it a poo. Oh, fuck's sake. Oh, there's always one. There's always fucking one. Oh, I mean, people that don't like the fourth one, that's fair, but I think you need to take a look at this one. As I called it in my review, time to call it a day to Die Hard. It's terrible. It's just so bad. It's just everything that you wouldn't want in a sequel. It's clearly a rush job. Bruce Willis is just phoning him. He just doesn't care anymore. He doesn't give a shit. It's just there for the paycheck. For me, this is where the series goes out of control. The action is just so over the top that it's not even funny how ridiculous it all is, to be honest. The fact that the action is even more over the top than the fourth one is just crazy. Absolutely crazy. And, like you said, Jack, it's just been gratuitously dumped on screen without any sort of consequence or no reason. And I don't like this father-son dynamic. I don't like Jai Courtney as Jack, the son. He doesn't add anything to the film for me, and I just personally found his performance to be very poor. I'm going to be honest. I don't rate him as an actor, but yeah, I don't know what else to say. I suppose there's a nice moment with him and his daughter again. That's cool. The villain sucks. The villain's terrible. The villain's plan is kind of unnecessarily complicated, but yeah, I guess.
His name is Yuri or something like that. Like Yuri something. I can't even remember his name.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yuri. Yeah, something or other. I actually fell asleep, I think, during this movie because it was that boring. I mean, the action would be fine if it wasn't so unrealistic. The fact is, because there's so much of it and it's just dumped on screen, and you're just sitting there thinking, when's this going to end now? It's just kind of boring, and yeah, this is one of those times. And that's the irony, is that this movie is actually the shortest of the series, but it feels long. And there's this whole thing about Yuri and his daughter, so I think there's meant to be some kind of parallels, but the story is really badly executed. The direction is poor as well. It's a movie that just signifies how much a franchise can go out of control. And yeah, the final sort of like the finale with the helicopters, and then when they just sort of like when they jump out the window, I think, and then they land in the pool or something. It's just too convenient, too unrealistic. I just don't buy that McClane would survive this anymore. It's just ridiculous. And again, the CGI is just terrible as well. And it's just such a boring film to watch. Like, there's really nothing in there that I can say was worth seeing. I mean, I think this probably will be the last film for a while. I don't know if they'll do another one. They probably might. If Bruce Willis needs more money, then I'm sure they'll do it. But yeah, just a very, very crap film, to be honest. A Good Day to Die Hard, I'll also give it a 2 out of 10. I don't really like it, and I want to never rewatch it again, if I'm going to be honest. But yeah, I guess that's it. We've kind of covered all bases of the 5 movies, but all that remains now is to kind of rank them, I guess, and maybe give them a score out of 50 as there's 5 films. So, Jack, would you like to give your overall sort of opinion on the series and do your ranking and ratings?
Yeah, well, I think the first Die Hard is a really great film. Die Hard 2, I think, is a pretty good sequel. Die Hard 3 is the best sequel. Die Hard 4 is a good film. And I think Die Hard 5, Good Day to Die Hard's utter shit. So, I mean, adding the scores up out of 50, well, I gave the first one a 10, second one a 8, so that's 18. Third one a 9, so that's 27, and then 7, that's 34. So 36 out of 50, and this
It's not
I'd
bad.
rank them. Yeah, and this is how I'd rank them. So number 5 would be A Good Day to Kill the Franchise. Number 4 would be Die Hard 4.0. Number 3 would be Die Hard 2, and number 2 would be Die Hard with a Vengeance, and number 1 would be Die Hard. So yeah, overall, I think it's a very good series, except for one film, which doesn't exist, which A Good Day to Kill a Franchise. But
It's a parallel universe, that film.
So that's all I really have to say.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I kind of consider Die Hard 5 to be kind of, it's almost like a glorified Die Hard fan film, like how bad it is, you know. But anyway, yeah. As for me, I really like the series. I think it's a good series. I'm glad I saw them, and I'm glad I got the chance to review them because it was interesting to watch them. Although I don't think I'd be watching the 5th one again anytime soon. As for how I'd rate them and total them, the first film I gave a 9 out of 10. Then the second one I gave a 7. So that would be 16. And then adding the third one, which was a 9, would then be 25. And then the fourth one was an 8 out of 10. The 25 at 8 would be 33. And then adding another 2 onto that would be 35. So I'm 1 point behind you. I give it a 35 out of 50, which isn't actually that bad, all things considered. That's pretty good. And yeah, as for how I'd rank them, number 5 would be A Good Day to Die Hard, or Time to Call It a Day to Die Hard. Number 4 would be Die Hard 2. Sorry, but that's just my opinion. Number 3 would be Die Hard 4. Number 2 would be Die Hard with a Vengeance, and number 1 would be the original Die Hard. So, yeah, it's a good series, but I do think it's run its course now. They've kind of exhausted it. There really isn't anything else they can do with this franchise. It's had its day. So that's kind of all I've got to say about it. And yeah, so I guess that's kind of it, really. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening and watching. And what do you think of the Die Hard films? Please comment down below. Let us know. Leave your ratings and rankings as well. We'd love to compare and contrast. And a big thanks to Jack, the Film Fanatic, for joining me today. And yeah, Jack, is there anything you want to say before we close off?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker!
Yeah, and yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers. So, until next time, cheerio. Da, 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 da.